one of the key absentees at that inauguration was the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, who rumor has it has fallen out of favor and may become a fall guy for the failings in Ukraine.
So another swearing-in ceremony for Vladimir Putin. Tell us what we saw, because it was just opulent finery, and it was just a huge show, wasn't it? Effectively.
It was essentially a show, and of course, it's one that we've become wearily familiar with, given this is the sixth time or fifth time, is it? But it was, in some respects, both surreal and chilling. Chilling, of course, because it's a reminder that he has won a sham election, effectively destroyed the democracy which he promised to preserve and develop when he took power in 2000, and also because of the way he has brutally destroyed all opposition, of course, culminating with the death of Alexei Navalny in that penal colony in Siberia. Um, it was also slightly surreal with all the pomp and ceremony. Unusually for Moscow, it was snowing outside. There was a ceremonial salute from a bunch of cannons that maybe managed to destroy a few trees. I'm not sure whether that was particularly intended. And some very chilling words for the West. We will be victorious. It was notable that in the coverage of this inauguration on Russian television, a lot of time was spent on a church service with the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, far more than you'd normally expect. And this was very much seen as Putin's way of reminding the world and Russia that his brutality in Ukraine has religious undertones, that it's ordained by the church, that it's almost a holy mission, of course, which is increasingly underlines a lot of what he says about that war.
The chairman of the Russian parliament, Ian, said, if there is Putin, there is Russia. If there is no Putin, there is no Russia. I was just musing to myself earlier that we would never say that about Rishi Sunak, and in fact, most leaders would never have that said of them. But how does Vladimir Putin see himself?
I think he sees himself as a modern day czar. I think he sees himself as an inheritor of the czarist tradition, as a strong man, as very much Russia's Peter the Great, and someone who will not tolerate dissent. He sees himself as the person whose mission it is to rebuild the old Russian Empire, the Ruski Mir, as he puts it, the Russian world, with Russia at the helm. Though perhaps the most accurate, in my view, comments that emerged today came from Alexei Navalny's widow, who said in a statement on YouTube, "Our country is led by a liar, a thief, and a murderer." So she wasn't pulling any punches, but of course she's well out of Russia at the moment.
Yeah, and look, will those words from Alexei Navalny's widow, will they resonate with Russians? Obviously, outside Russia, they resonate. We are talking about them. But is she shouting into an echo chamber effectively when she tries to reach the Russian people with a statement like that?
It's hard to say because we see a lot, we read a lot about how the Russian people support Putin. I mean, I don't think we can take the election result at all seriously, but there are claims that Russian people are whipped up by the nationalist sentiment, that they support the war in Ukraine. But like any dictatorship, it's incredibly difficult to know what's really in the mind of the Russian people, because of course when you're in a tyranny, you don't want to say anything that might be construed as being critical of the government. One likes to think there are those in Russia for whom those words are still meaningful, who thoroughly dislike Putin and everything that he stands for. The degree to which that opposition is there, the degree to which there is real suspicion and dislike of Putin is harder to judge. But I don't doubt that it is certainly there. It's only the question of how great that is. I mean, it's one of the issues with when you set yourself up as a supreme leader, as the embodiment of Russia, as a dictator, that it becomes almost impossible to get rid of someone like that in a non-violent way,
Mm.
and in the same way that you see in Xi Jinping in China setting himself up as a leader for life, and of course that's effectively what Putin's done by changing the constitution. It means the prospect of a peaceful and constitutional change of power become increasingly difficult. And it's all about the court intrigue, what's going on behind the scenes. And of course, it was significant today that one of the key absentees at that inauguration was the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, who rumor has it has fallen out of favor and may become a fall guy for the failings in Ukraine. And clearly there will be a shake-up of the court of Putin. But clearly he has enemies, and perhaps the most dangerous time for any dictator is when your power appears to be absolutely supreme.
87% of people back his leadership. That is a poll from inside Russia, and as you say, we can't really ratify any poll within Russia or the elections because many will argue rightly that it was not a democratic process. Look, this is his new 6-year term. It is a fifth term. He overtakes Stalin. He'll be Russia's longest serving ruler since Catherine the Great if he sees out his fifth term, which will take him to 2036 when he's 83. And obviously, as you've said, unless he is killed or dies, you think it very unlikely that he will ever not be Russia's president. Effectively, there is no deposing him other than by death. But I just wonder whether Vladimir Putin is having conversations about his legacy, because it's all very well wanting to remain in power until your dying days. But if you ultimately want to be thought of as one of the great leaders, surely you have to ensure a legacy there.
You do. And one of the chilling things about Putin is he does very much see his legacy as rebuilding the Soviet Empire,
Mm.
which he regretted the demise of. He really does see his legacy in restoring the greatness of Russia,
Who
in
gets to
restore.
continue that though, Ian? I think I'm saying here, really. How does he continue his work?
Um, well, I guess it depends on who eventually succeeds him, the power that person will have, and how successful he is in his mission in Ukraine. I mean, it's interesting and chilling, of course, that this inauguration was accompanied by drills involving tactical nuclear weapons, which was designed, I guess, to send a message to NATO, and of course the Ukrainians revealing yet another assassination attempt against their president.
Mm.
Not the first, there have been many of those, but clearly perhaps the Russian security forces, the Russian FSB, the old KGB, seeing that as maybe a suitable inauguration present for Putin.
Tell us more about this plot to assassinate Zelensky. As you say, not the first time, but we know that 2 security officials have been arrested on suspicion of plotting with Russia to assassinate President Zelensky.
Interesting, because there have been many attempts against his life, and Zelensky himself has counted about 10 or I think a dozen. There's not usually much detail emerges about these, and it's not surprising that he has a target on his back because he's been such a successful wartime leader, such an inspiring wartime leader. In fact, one of the first things the Russians wanted to do when they invaded was to eliminate him,
Mm.
and I think that's remained the case throughout the war. But there has been more details on this. It was an inside job, we're told. There were people within the Ukrainian security forces. It did involve, we're told, rocket-propelled grenades, drones, mines. So there was a fair old arsenal that they were attempting to wield against him. But it has been thwarted. And Ukraine has been unusually forthcoming with the details about the attempt. I think that they were equally as keen on the eve of this inauguration to demonstrate that they had thwarted this Russian effort, and it had not been successful.
Look, really interesting to speak to you. Thank you so much for lending us your wisdom. Ian Williams, former foreign correspondent in Russia and author of Putin's Missile War, Russia's Strike Campaign in Ukraine. Good to speak to you, Ian. Thank you.